Ukrainian soldiers apparently in the embattled town of Soledar this morning. Insisting Russian forces have not yet taken control of the area. Soledar and nearby Bakhmut are one of the hottest flashpoints in a war being fought in freezing cold conditions. Russian forces have been throwing all they have at the towns, taking high casualties and inflicting huge destruction. Last night, Yevgeny Prigozhin, head of the once secretive Wagner group of mercenaries, uploaded a photo, apparently inside Soledar's salt mines. The area isn't as important strategically as it is symbolically. It would be the first significant Russian advance for many months. Prigozhin has led the fight around Soledar and is playing an increasingly prominent role in the conflict. Here, he was filmed encouraging Russian prisoners to sign up to fight in return for their sentences being quashed. But this is how many Russian recruits end up. The contract has ended and they're going home, Prigozhin says of the body bags in a video shot at the end of last year. Happy New Year, he adds.
Well, we've seen the Wagner group in general go from a sort of pre-war shadowy mercenary outfit that primarily operated in Syria and Africa to being more integrated within the Russian military. And now we're seeing a further evolving of an overt and very public separate force led by Yevgeny Prigozhin himself. He obviously has a lot of ambition and he's using that group to try and achieve that.
Soledar is not far from Bakhmut, also seen of continued heavy fighting. But British officials say Ukraine's defences there look likely to hold no matter what happens in Soledar. The other flashpoint right now is further north, where Ukrainian forces are making slow advances around the Russian-held town of Kreminna. A major counter-offensive is expected by the spring that could see Ukraine push down towards Melitopol, cutting off Russian supply routes to Crimea. Key to what happens next is access to weapons. These are American military vehicles en route to NATO's eastern flank. Today, British officials said they planned to send tanks to Ukraine. The army has long been asking allies for them, but until now have been turned down.
NATO standard tanks are generally much better than their Russian counterparts. They're heavier. They have a lot of protection. They've got very good optics, but they also allow for a good range of firepower. But it really does depend firstly, how many Ukraine gets. It looks like the approach will be sort of modest amounts, but from many European contributing nations, which will give a main battle tank capability.
Speaking to officials, Russian leader Vladimir Putin admitted life in annexed parts of Ukraine is difficult, but he's invested so much in this invasion, he's not backing down. Today, announcing a new military commander. It's Ukrainian sacrifices that have determined the course of this conflict. President Zelenskyy today repeating warnings of a new possible Russian invasion from Belarus. It's the depths of winter, but the flames of war are burning bright.
Well, earlier I spoke to Juliia Mendel in Kiev. She's a former spokesperson to President Zelenskyy and the author of The Fight of Our Lives. I began by asking her about the significance of these battles in Soledar and Bakhmut.
Soledar and Bakhmut are two major hot very battlegrounds right now, because what is happening there is madness, absolutely, and it's a hell, because people even don't count dead already, because there are so many dead people there. And this is very symbolic for Russians. They want to take over these two cities for the reason that there are resources there, and because in this way they can actually say that they captured almost all Donetsk region. And Russians, of course, are saying saying that they almost captured Soledar. But what I've heard from multiple servicemen there, reporters, and from our general staff is that the battle is there. Ukrainians are there. They have not left Soledar, and they really try to give the fight back. The thing is that Russians are trying to cut the supplies for Ukrainian army, and right now they did not manage to do that. The second fake, which is really one big one, Russians say that if they capture Soledar, they will encircle Bakhmut, but they will not.
And Russia is clearly piling a lot of resource into this area and sending the Wagner Group mercenaries there as well. I mean, is this the kind of battle for which Ukraine wants tanks from Britain and Germany and other European neighbors?
This is one of these battles. Let me say that, yes, it's very hot in Donbass, but Russia right now is shelling 8 regions of Ukraine every day. Also, we see that there is a lot of Russian troops coming to Belarus, and they are trying to be near the border of Ukraine. The Ukrainian military leadership, they are always considering the scenario that Russia might want to make the next offensive through the Belarus. Of course, it can be just training. Of course, they can, play there to try to distract us. But also, this is the threat that we see. So right now, Ukraine is preparing for the next possible Russian offensive, maybe in March or April or late February. So if we want to win, if we want to defend, we must get the political decisions to get all this weaponry and tanks and air defense right now, to get them as fast as possible, to train the people and to be ready.
So it doesn't sound like just a handful of tanks is going to be enough.
Well, let me say, first of all, that Western weaponry, Western equipment is much more modern and much more efficient than all Russian, in many ways, treasury tanks or equipment that in many cases come from the Soviet Union. The second thing is, if we are equipped enough, let's remember that there are all these sanctions on Russia, and it means that Russia runs out of missiles, Russia runs out of equipment, of military, of people, and it doesn't have actually supplies to renew production on the scale it needs to invade Ukraine. And the third and very important moment, yes, Ukraine also runs out of all the equipment and also, loses maybe something on the battle and definitely needs more to be equipped as much as possible. So all these 3 factors, they are very important to understand why it's crucial, to make these decisions now, to train us and to provide us all these means that will help us to stand against Russia.
Juliia Mendel, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm joined now by the former US Defense Advisor to Ukraine, Liam Collins, who was founding director of the Modern War Institute at West Point, the US military academy. Liam Collins, do you think Ukraine will get the tanks it wants?
They will get some of the tanks they want. They're never going to get the absolute numbers that they want or that they actually need. But the fact that they're getting them now, that's definitely important. And remember, they are the smaller military who's much more competent than Russia. But by being smaller, they have to absolutely replace any of their combat losses and get additional capability to kind of make up for Russia's mass, the size of its military.
It's clear from Juliia Mendel's point of view that Ukraine is not going to give up on Bakhmut and Soledar and says, Russian propaganda that they're about to take these places is wrong. How does it look from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, Russia's always putting out this propaganda, so you really can't believe anything that's coming out of there. And what you can do is look at Bakhmut or Soledar or anywhere that the war has happened to date in the last 10.5 months. And Ukraine, again, being the smaller military, they can't afford to take significant losses. So what they do have fought extremely smart, given what they have, right? Defend where they can. They retreat when they must so that they can conduct counterattacks on a time and place that's conducive to and favorable to their conditions. And we've seen this play out. So they will not pull out of either of them unless they have to, right? To preserve combat power. But then it's really just a short-term give up of terrain that really offers no strategic or tactical value, and then retake it at a later day with a counteroffensive that we saw in the defense of Kyiv, and we saw when we took territory in Kharkiv and Kherson.
What does their use of these Wagner Group mercenaries tell us about the state of Russian forces?
Yeah, I mean, it shows how sad of a state that Russia's military is. Not only that they have to rely on these kind of extra military forces, but also the news of changing the leadership in the Defense Department there. the constantly changing of generals as well shows, one, that things aren't going well if they're rotating through the leadership this much. And two, the leadership that they rotate out, they don't seem to fire. They just move them into other positions, which shows that Russia really doesn't have a deep bench of generals to put in these key positions.
So how does the timeline now look to you when you look ahead on this war?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't change from what I kind of saw in the first couple months of the war. This is going to be a long, drawn-out fight, right? If you think of how can you reach any kind of negotiated settlement, Ukraine cannot give up any territory to Russia because, look, they never got their Donbass back since 2014 and 2015, so they don't have any expectation that if they enter into peace negotiations, they'll get the territory back. And Russia doesn't seem likely, right, to give up everything that they've taken to date. And so if you look at that, what kind of negotiated settlement can you have? There's nothing that's sustainable for either partner. So it's going to drag on until, right, either Ukraine cannot fight, but as long as, they get the support, they'll be able to do this. I mean, they won't give up, and they'll turn to guerrilla warfare if they have to. But until Russia just decides it's just too costly and they have to pull out.
So is this sort of a battle of who can supply the two armies and keep them going?
Yeah, I mean, really to some extent, right? As long as Ukraine has the capacity to fight, they will. And even after they lose this capacity, they will fight, right? They will operate in guerrilla warfare if it came to an occupation, which it wouldn't. And the same thing for Russia, right? Until they decide, hey, this is just too costly, they're going to continue to do that. But they're just not at that point yet, despite the cost that they've incurred to date. They just aren't there yet. It's going to take a while until they figure that out.
Liam Collins, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.